Homage to the root teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered, even in millions of kalpas. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara. Please generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let's continue with the words of my perfect teacher. We've finished the 8 unfavorable conditions, and today we begin the 10 advantages. The essence of a precious human life is having the freedom, the leisure to study the Dharma. To achieve that, there are special factors, or you could say necessary means, which are having all the advantages in place. There are 10 advantages altogether. The first half is the 5 individual advantages, and the second half is the 5 circumstantial advantages. The 5 individual advantages break down into 5 aspects. The advantage of support, the advantage of place, the advantage of complete faculties, the advantage of intention, and the advantage of faith. These make 5 in total. Let's start by summarizing them. As Nagarjuna said, to be born a human being, with all faculties intact, in a central land, with a proper livelihood, and with faith in the Dharma. This comes from Nagarjuna's own writings. Now let us go into more detail. Without human life, we could never encounter Dharma. And since we have obtained this precious human life of freedoms and advantages, we have what is called the advantage of support. Support here means our identity as human beings. That identity already gives us favorable conditions for Dharma practice. The text makes this very clear. Now, among the vast ocean of sentient beings, obtaining a human life with the chance to practice the Dharma is vitally important. Without a human body, even if the Buddha has appeared in the world, even if the Dharma has not declined, even if qualified spiritual masters are transmitting the most profound teachings, none of it would matter. We could not encounter the Dharma. We could not receive those precious pith instructions, and we could not understand the meaning of the teachings. All of that would be absolutely impossible. That is why we say a human life is hard to obtain and the Dharma is hard to encounter. And yet, here we are. Despite such extraordinary difficulty, we already have the 8 freedoms discussed above and the 10 advantages we are now examining. We have obtained this precious human life endowed with freedoms and advantages. From the depths of our hearts, we should feel deep and heartfelt joy. Why? Because as human beings, we are perfectly suited for practicing Dharma. Now, if we were reborn in the God realms, the pleasures there would far exceed anything we experience as humans. Some wealthy people in our world think they are enjoying heavenly pleasures, but that is not the case at all. In the higher God realms, the enjoyments are inexhaustible. It is not like our world, where things run out once you use them up. There is no comparison. In many of those God realms, whatever you think of appears the very moment you think of it. Life as a god is far more pleasant than life as a human. If you think, I would like something more delicious to eat, whatever food you imagine appears at once before you. If you think, I would like to wear finer clothes, the moment the thought arises, the clothes have already appeared. Or if you wish to meditate, your mind settles at once. It is not like us humans, who long to fall asleep but toss and turn in agony, bones rolling about on the bed all night long. We try so hard to sleep, and yet we only grow more and more awake. Eventually we get up and sit for a while, and the moment we sit down, we feel drowsy again. Some people endure so much suffering because of this body of the 5 aggregates. The happiness of the gods far surpasses all of this, and yet the gods lack the Dharma. Consider this. Why do all the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon attain Buddhahood in human form? We never hear of anyone becoming a Buddha as Indra, or as Brahma, or as Vishnu. It simply never happens. Every single one of them attains perfect enlightenment in human form. There is a most special interdependent connection at work here. Of course, in the God realms, a very few beings of sharp faculties and exceptional connections do occasionally hear some Dharma teachings. But for them, hearing the Dharma amounts to little more than receiving a single teaching and nothing beyond that. Complete renunciation of samsara, or the arising of bodhicitta, is extremely rare among them, so we need to appreciate this human body of ours. Think about it carefully. If we had not obtained a human life like this, we would not have encountered the Mahayana Dharma in this very life. Just look, many people here manage to receive the complete teachings from a single lineage. 100 lessons, 200 lessons, all the way through to the end of the oral transmission. Does any other kind of sentient being have this opportunity? Not at all. Hungry ghosts and non-human beings do sometimes have the wish to hear the Dharma. They try to seek out qualified spiritual masters. But when it comes to actually joining the teaching assembly, they may show up for the first lesson, but by the second their minds are already scattered, distracted by all sorts of external temptations. Their mental bodies move even faster than a human's, and so they chase off after those distractions. It is extremely rare for non-human beings to complete a long, stable transmission. Ordinarily, some hungry ghost kings and spirits do attend whenever a qualified master is teaching. We simply cannot see them with our physical eyes, but in reality they are present and listening to the teachings. It was the same in the Buddha's time. Even now, whether it is a study group leader or a Dharma teacher giving a teaching, are there non-human beings listening? Absolutely. There is no doubt about this. But their way of receiving and completing a transmission is completely different from ours. Our human form is exceptionally well suited to hearing the Dharma. That is why all the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon attain enlightenment in human form. There is a unique interdependent connection at work here. So now that we have obtained this body, as the way of the Bodhisattva tells us, this is something we could not have achieved even in our dreams. What a cause for joy! If we put this body to good use, it far surpasses any vessel made of gold or silver. But if we fail to use it well, if we use this very human identity to commit negative deeds instead, that would be a terrifying thing. The very first point to consider is how important this advantage of support is. We absolutely must make use of it. In this degenerate age, however, there are times when people simply do not cherish their human life. They do not practice the genuine Dharma in a proper, step-by-step way. They constantly run into obstacles and adverse conditions. On top of that, there are problems with some of the teachings being given out there. Some of what people pass off as Dharma is actually quite troublesome. Recently, I heard that over in northeast China, people are saying you no longer need to do the 5 preliminary practices. Just pay 600 yuan and that covers it. When I heard this, part of me was surprised. 2 years ago, the price was already 600 yuan. And with prices rising all the time, how is it that this preliminary fee still has not gone up? That was my first thought. But at the same time, I felt deeply uncomfortable. Why? It is not that we have lost some of our own preliminary practice students to them. That does not matter, since there are people all over the country. But what I actually heard is that after listening to these claims, some people began convincing others to stop doing the preliminaries. They would say it is just too exhausting, that you need not work so hard. They would tell people that this other teacher's method is incredibly easy, that realization comes with a mere snap of the fingers. Just pay 600 yuan, no work needed at all. And it is quick, so very quick. And if you don't have the money, they would say, I'll pay it for you. They even tried to persuade some Dharma teachers to do it. They would say, Venerable teacher, you should go too. I'll make the offering for you. You can go over there. That master is so compassionate. He says there's no need for all that austerity. Like doing 100,000 prostrations. How exhausting. Anyway, just pay 600 yuan and it's quick and easy. People who talk like this are extraordinarily foolish. Many flock there in droves. Quite a few of them had originally been following a proper, systematic path of study. They had sincerely wanted to practice certain teachings properly, and yet so many of them ended up setting it all aside. Then I thought about it. Of course, many people go there hoping to get rich, and hoping for prosperity is not wrong in itself. But when it leads people to drop practices, they should not drop. The obstacles it creates are considerable, and it does serious harm to Tibetan Buddhism as a whole. Throughout history, whether we speak of Guru Padmasambhava, Master Tsongkhapa, Sakya Pandita, the omniscient Longchenpa, Mifam Rinpoche, or our precious Guru Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, great masters like these would never dare to give direct pointing out instructions to disciples who had not first completed the preliminaries in proper sequence. And these elder masters practiced the preliminaries step by step themselves. They also urged all of their disciples to complete the preliminary practices in full. This is mentioned later in the words of my perfect teacher. In the lineages of Jigme Lingpa and Jigme Gyalwai Nyugu, every single practitioner was expected to recite Guru Rinpoche's mantra 10 million times and perform 100,000 prostrations. The other day I noticed a very dedicated practitioner here who has completed over 10 million prostrations. She is remarkably diligent, prostrating for many years without ever stopping. If virtuous roots like these were destroyed by a few irresponsible individuals, it would have a negative impact on Buddhism. Many people nowadays use all sorts of methods just to make money for themselves, just to collect offerings for themselves. Monastics have their own ways of making money, and lay people have their own ways too. In this degenerate age, you could say everyone is showing off their own tricks and using all kinds of tactics. But to say that this entire sequential path of practice should be demolished is utterly unreasonable. I actually wanted to speak with this person directly, whether in the name of the Institute or on my own behalf. This kind of claim is completely unprecedented across all of mainland China. Now, if this teacher were a great accomplished master, and he said there is no need for the preliminaries because he will directly point out the nature of mind for you, I could understand that. For a true Mahasiddha, like Padmasambhava or Vimalamitra in the past, if the master is a being of the highest accomplishment and the disciple also has extraordinary faculties, then when such exceptional circumstances come together, giving the pointing out directly can be appropriate. But those masters never ask for 600 or 300 yuan in return for it. This preliminaries fee will probably go up again after a while. If it didn't rise, it wouldn't keep pace with inflation, would it? Was this the price set back in Guru Padmasambhava's time? So sometimes we simply cannot stay quiet about this. We feel strongly that we must oppose and condemn this kind of statement. As for these so-called lineage masters, whoever they are, whether they like hearing this or not, they will certainly be unhappy once they hear what I am saying, and their disciples may be unhappy too. But I am prepared to say this to their faces. I hope those disciples will investigate carefully, again and again. Among all the lineage masters of Tibetan Buddhism, has any one of them ever said that money can substitute for practice? Perhaps I'm simply not well informed enough. But after studying and researching the Dharma for so many years, and reading through the histories of all the great masters and accomplished ones of Tibetan Buddhism, and looking at what we have now in Tibet, and especially the whole history of the Nyingma tradition, all of which I can say I have read, the great history of Dzogchen, the red annals, the white annals, the blue annals, the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism by Dudjom Rinpoche, and the ornament of Jambudvipa that we discussed the other day. I have gone through all the accounts of these lineage masters. In texts like the Longchen Nyingtik and the Vima Nyingtik, there are many biographies of masters, but not one of them says you can pay money to skip the preliminaries. So now that we have this perfect human identity, we must pay attention to exactly how we ought to practice. We hope it will be systematic, step by step. For instance, the preciousness of human life is not just something you say with your mouth. You need to feel it in your heart. This human life of mine is incredibly rare. I should rely on this body, this flesh and bone, this fragile vessel, to practice the authentic Dharma. As the way of the Bodhisattva says, We should transform this body into a priceless treasure, the very body of a Tathagata. We absolutely must not use this human identity to commit negative deeds. Our body already has every advantage. Our support is already complete. If we rely on this body to do every kind of wrong, we not only create misdeeds for ourselves, but also bring harm to Buddhism as a whole. That would be a real tragedy. The fine traditions of Buddhism, handed down from generation to generation, were excellent from the start. For them to be tarnished by the conduct of a few individuals would be deeply regrettable. In this degenerate age, the power of Mara is very strong. If 100 people teach the genuine Dharma, not everyone will accept it. But let just one person spread harmful or false teachings, and people readily embrace them. Why? Because the discursive thoughts of worldly people resonate strongly with the workings of Mara. Whatever teachings or thoughts Mara has empowered fit the minds of ordinary worldly people perfectly. Isn't that so? Let's look at it. When people hear the name of Buddha Amitabha, many do not give rise to faith at once, but sing a popular song, one that stirs up craving or anger. And how many people respond to that? Take a Dharma teacher who advertises and promotes a talk on the Amitabha Sutra across a whole city. If a few hundred or even 1,000 people show up, that already is quite a success. But when a celebrity promotes a concert and advertises it in advance, how many people turn up then? And many in the crowd are so excited and carried away that they nearly faint or party on and on in a frenzy. When I see this sort of thing on television screens, I keep thinking to myself, oh, worldly people really are so deluded. We are already living in a dreamlike, illusory world as it is. If we keep intoxicating ourselves further like this, in the end we will have no idea which way we are heading. Yet most people do not realize this at all. So the power of these harmful, non-Buddhist forces is very strong. I hope everyone stays alert to this. As for myself, I do not care what happens to me. Whether people slander me or criticize me, it makes no difference. As an ordinary being, I am full of faults, flawed and unwholesome by nature, so it is only natural for others to point that out. There is nothing wrong with it, but for the sake of the Dharma, we do have to speak up. When you see things that go against the Dharma, or hear words that contradict it, then when it is necessary, you simply have to point them out. There is no need to say only pleasant things and make sweet speeches. Life is very short. If we make no contribution to spreading the Dharma, we are certainly not genuine Mahayana practitioners. So on one hand, I also hope that the many Dharma teachers here, some of whom may one day become abbots or give Dharma teachings, will not do anything inappropriate, will not stoop to this kind of cheap trickery. It would be a frightening thing if the pure gold-like lineage of the genuine masters were contaminated by people's own mental fabrications. This is deeply alarming, so we must be vigilant about it. At the same time, within our own communities right now, people are spreading all sorts of plausible sounding but misleading so-called Dharma teachings. When that happens, you should sharpen your discerning eyes, open the wisdom within your heart, and examine again and again what is right and what is wrong, what to adopt and what to reject. Otherwise, sentient beings in this age are terribly deluded. When someone says, "Oh, this is excellent, so wonderful," everyone goes along with the flow and echoes the same opinions. It is laughable. You have worked so hard to find this bright, luminous path. If you lose your direction now, you could fall 1,000 miles in an instant. Next, the text says that if we are born in a remote border region where the genuine Dharma does not exist, we cannot encounter the authentic Dharma at all. Since we have been born in a central land where the Buddha's teachings flourish, we have what is called the advantage of place. The text also explains that if we were reborn in a border region where the Dharma does not thrive, a remote place with neither the Dharma of scripture nor the Dharma of realization, we would never encounter the Dharma or meet a spiritual teacher. We would never come to understand the true principles of what to adopt and what to avoid. But that is not our situation at all. Many of us here are living in places where the Buddha's teachings flourish. The conditions are excellent. If there were no Dharma at all, some people would not even have the chance to take refuge in the three jewels. But as things stand, we do have this kind of opportunity and connection. And I often think of something else as well. Many of you here listening to the teachings today are also living during a very convenient time, whether in mainland China or in Tibet. During the 1960s and 1970s, the Dharma suffered a historic destruction. Had you been reborn at that time, so many of you would not have the virtuous roots and merit that you have today. I once heard some teachers speak of that period. It was Khenpo Jigwang who told us this, and we received many teachings in his presence. He said that our precious Guru, Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, and Khenpo Chokyap of Horshi were both extraordinary practitioners for the whole Sertha region. Why did he say so? Because in the 1960s and 1970s, many people were too frightened even to recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra. Yet at that time, Khenpo Chokyap read at least about 20 pages of scripture every single day, and he never once broke this practice. Our precious Guru, Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, not only read vast amounts of scripture, but also actively spread the teachings. Given how dangerous the political situation was at the time, you could say he was teaching at the risk of his own life. Later, many of his senior disciples here told us about those days. When our precious Guru went out to herd sheep and tend the livestock, his other disciples would follow him up to the mountaintop. One of them would stand guard outside, watching to see whether anyone was coming. Then the rest of them would study the Dharma together, sometimes going into small caves nearby. Those little caves were the very places where our precious Guru taught during the most dangerous times. Even then they never stopped studying and contemplating the Dharma, and they kept on until they left this world. Throughout their whole lives, from childhood onward, all they ever did was learn the Dharma, spread the Dharma, and contemplate the Dharma. Living this way, they fulfilled the great purpose of their lives. Every one of them was like that. Khenpo Jigwang, who taught us back then, was the same. He humbly said he would not dare claim to be like those great masters, but he too never once abandoned the Dharma, even in such difficult times. Now, when I consider the people among us today, forget about reaching their level. At the slightest breeze of trouble, people are scared out of their wits. Some lay practitioners, for instance, when the local police station came to do a routine registration, disappeared afterward and never showed up again. What is so frightening about a registration? There is nothing to be afraid of. I heard that last year some lay practitioners were holding a group study session. Someone knocked on the door, and this time it was not even about a registration. Many people panicked and ran, and it turned out the person knocking was only there to collect the water bill. Quite something, isn't it? So our present connection with the Dharma, on the one hand, it is very good. We live in such favorable times. Every day we can study and contemplate Dharma without a worry. As long as we focus on the Dharma, everything goes smoothly, and we meet no real obstacles. From the time we began the way of the Bodhisattva until now, we have studied together for a long stretch, and we have not run into any adverse conditions. Yet some timid people get completely spooked and run off at the slightest hint of trouble. Yet such people would fall back at the slightest obstacle, let alone during the 10-year turmoil of the Cultural Revolution. So while we enjoy this advantage of place, we still need to rely on our own effort. We should examine ourselves honestly and see what kind of practitioners we really are. If the times change, if the whole social climate shifts, how will we relate to the Dharma then? This is something we ought to reflect on carefully. I have read many stories of practitioners from the past, and I myself especially love reading about those senior practitioners. I feel their hearts were filled entirely with the Dharma, with nothing else mixed in. None of the 8 worldly concerns, no politics, no economics, none of the various shocks and poisons of society. Many of them lived solely to benefit sentient beings and to serve the Dharma. Beyond that, outwardly at least, There seemed to be nothing else in their lives. They were devoted purely to spiritual practice. Some very devout senior practitioners in Tibet and in mainland China alike keep their thoughts entirely on the Dharma and nothing else. But among the present generation, whether monastics or lay practitioners, these young people are forever chasing after money and all sorts of other things. They say they have taken refuge in the Dharma, but in reality their study and practice are not devoted, not grounded, not deep at all. So we should keep examining ourselves again and again. Since we have come into this world, what place does the Dharma truly hold in our hearts? We should examine our own minds again and again, and then we will understand. Think of the great masters and practitioners of the past. What did they go through to obtain the Dharma? It was terribly hard back then. When we read how some senior and advanced practitioners searched for the Dharma, the accounts of their journeys are so moving that we feel deeply touched and ashamed of ourselves. So now, with such favorable conditions before us, with no great obstacles to speak of, as long as we are willing to practice, the outer conditions are rather ideal. Given all this, I would say that everyone's environment can be considered complete. That is the advantage of place. Now, for the next advantage, if our sense faculties were impaired or incomplete, that would be an obstacle to practicing the Dharma. Since we are free of such defects, we have what is called the advantage of complete faculties. For instance, some people are in a vegetative state, and others have various kinds of disability. Some cannot hear, some cannot see, some cannot speak. There are all sorts of disabilities. For them, even the wish to receive Dharma teachings is very hard to fulfill because of the limits of their body. Since their various sense faculties are incomplete, receiving the Dharma fully and thoroughly would be an enormous challenge. Looking at mainland China today, there are quite a number of people with disabilities. Across the whole country, there are over 80 million, roughly that many at any rate. But we were not born into those circumstances, and for that we should count ourselves very fortunate. I wonder whether you have ever reflected on this. I often think about it. The Dharma speaks of having all one's faculties intact, and it is exactly as it says. If the faculties needed to receive the Dharma were incomplete, some people would be in a pitiable situation. In their hearts they may have faith, a good and kindly heart turned toward the Buddha, but in reality they can manage nothing else, and that is very sad. For us, however, thanks to the merit of our past lives, our situation is quite different. Some of us may not hear very well, and some may not see very clearly, but in reality the great majority of us have the full capacity to receive the Dharma. When we think of those who are utterly destitute, whether beggars or people with severe disabilities, we see how hard it is for them to bring forth their virtuous roots. So in this life we should rejoice that our faculties are complete, and reflect on this deeply. Now, if someone's way of life runs contrary to the Dharma, they will commit all kinds of misdeeds and stray from the true path, but we have already given rise to faith and understanding in virtuous practice. That is the advantage of intention. Still, we do need to be careful. There have been practitioners who were once doing very well, but who later, through the influence of harmful teachers and companions, let their mind streams be polluted with wrong views. After that, they began doing all kinds of harmful things, every sort of misdeed. Some who had been ordained and kept many precepts later returned to lay life and committed all manner of negative deeds. Such cases do exist, including people we know personally, people who had once received empowerments and taken pratimoksha and bodhisattva vows. For a time they lived as ascetic monks and seemed to be doing quite well. But then, as the various negative tendencies in their mind streams surfaced, they felt powerless to go on, disrobed, returned to lay life, and started a family. In the end, they did every kind of harmful thing, killing, stealing, every sort of misdeed imaginable. For such people, we can only sigh with deep sorrow. There is nothing more to be done, and it is heartbreaking. Even if the Buddha himself appeared before them in this life, there would be nothing he could do. for they do not even have the wish to purify their misdeeds. Some lay practitioners too start out with great faith in the Guru and the three jewels, but in the end abandon it all. The things some of them say are frightening. They will declare, "If I fall to the lower realms, so be it. From now on, I will never study the Dharma again. From now on, I will burn all my Dharma texts." To hear such words makes me tremble. These people are so deluded that when it comes to cause and effect and what to adopt or reject, they will not even listen. They are just like the thieves and robbers of the world today, who refuse to obey the law and will not hear a word of reason. That is why we should always supplicate the Guru and the three jewels, praying that such wrong views and harmful thoughts never arise in our mind streams. If they were to arise, we would rather leave this world early. I often think this way, but I trust that as long as my mind stream has not been terribly polluted by Mara, then under normal conditions, in this very life, it would be impossible for me to lose faith in the three jewels. Why am I so sure? Because my faith in the three jewels is not mere lip service. I have already felt it deep in my heart, just as I can feel that fire is hot. That is my direct experience. In the same way, I now feel that the Buddha is true and the Dharma is beyond comparison. This feeling has already become a very strong, deeply rooted tendency in my heart. And so, under normal conditions, it truly will not change. But I am somewhat concerned for those fellow practitioners who have not studied for very long. Some may have taken ordination, yet ordination alone may not serve much purpose. If your view and understanding are not solid, simply shaving your head means very little, because hair grows back easily. Within about 3 months, these people who have disrobed look no different from anyone else in a crowd. In Chinese Buddhism, there are distinctive ordination marks, called jiba, made on the head to identify someone as a monastic. But with modern technology continuously advancing, those marks may eventually be removable in the future. So external marks cannot bind you for life. What matters most is having firm, unwavering faith in your heart. With that, I believe you can sustain your practice throughout this life. It is the same for lay practitioners. Nowadays, some people take up Buddhism easily and abandon it just as easily. Why is that? It is because the Dharma has not sunk deep enough into their minds. So right now, whether we are monastics or lay practitioners, our most important task is to carry the Dharma out into the world. I find it a real pity about some monasteries these days. Why? Because they draw enormous crowds as tourist spots, and yet the teachers there never make a point of teaching the Dharma or explaining the scriptures. The devotees themselves, apart from offering incense and bowing to the Buddha images, never seek out or ask about the true meaning of the Dharma. In the end, those visitors only form a slight positive connection with the Dharma, but the real Dharma cannot take root deep in their hearts. Monasteries should put more effort into setting up teaching halls for explaining the Dharma. That is very important. To have a beautiful teaching hall that is never used or used only once a month is a real waste. If I had the chance to be the abbot of a monastery, the very first thing I would build is a hall for teaching, and I would have teachings given there every single day. If I could teach myself, I would. And if I could not teach in person, I would find someone with a solid level of Buddhist training within the monastery and have them teach each day. That way, visitors from all over could come to understand the principles of the Dharma. Otherwise, as it is now, many people do not grasp even the most basic Buddhist principles, let alone the profound ones. Yesterday I watched a video of a very famous Dharma teacher giving a teaching. In the course of his explanation, he cited a scriptural passage about refuting arising from the four extremes, which is what we often discuss. The refutation of arising from self, from other, from both, and without cause. He taught over 10 minutes or so on it, and I also laughed for those same 10 minutes. Then I turned it off and watched no more. It is quite something these days. There are cases where even Dharma teachers do not properly understand the Dharma. It is remarkable. Not all of them are like that, of course, but a few genuinely do not understand the Dharma. There is nothing more to say about it. This teacher himself even admitted that it was too profound and very hard to understand, and indeed he himself had not understood it. In fact, it is not all that difficult to explain. For educated lay practitioners, for university students and young people, as long as a teacher explains it clearly, the refutation of arising from self, from other, from both, and without cause is not so hard to understand. But he had gotten the whole explanation backwards, and once everything was reversed, the reasoning became utterly unsound. So I feel that sometimes, without a proper Dharma education, on the surface, everyone thinks what they are doing is correct. Dharma teachers think they are right. Lay practitioners think they are right. But the real principles of Buddhism, including emptiness and the infallibility of cause and effect, need to be taught by people with proper training. That is very important. Simply wearing monastic robes does not make someone a qualified Dharma teacher. I do not think it works that way at all. You need to have received genuine training within a Buddhist community, in a proper and formal Buddhist institute. Otherwise, you may have only a rough understanding of Buddhism, and then, through various circumstances and connections, whether you are a Dharma teacher or a lay practitioner, you end up becoming very famous. Once you are famous, everyone flocks to you in admiration. People think, this person is so famous now. Even a photo taken with them is an honor for a lifetime. They assume that everything this famous person says must be 100% correct. Famous, so they must be right. And so everyone listens with rapt attention. But then, well, I have a certain feeling about this, and I had better not say any more. So that was the advantage of intention. For this advantage to be in place, we must fully understand the principles of the Dharma. That way, we will not easily regress to our old ways. This is a very good method for preventing regression. Now for the fifth advantage. If we do not give rise to genuine faith toward the Dharma, which is the very object of faith, then our minds cannot turn toward the Dharma at all. We need to understand in our hearts the supreme, unequaled qualities of the Dharma. Once we understand that, we naturally develop great respect and devotion. It works the same way in worldly life. Take two university students. If one is clearly superior in character and wisdom, the other cannot help but respect him, at least on rational grounds, unless of course that person is completely irrational, in which case nothing can be done. In the same way, among all the truths of all phenomena, the Dharma is the most supreme and unsurpassed. If from the depths of our hearts we feel that it is the best, that among all worldly knowledge the Buddha is the greatest and the Dharma the most true, then we will develop faith in it. Of course, a precondition for such faith is that the person has a karmic connection to the Dharma from past lives. Without that connection, even if the Dharma is absolutely true and cannot be refuted by any reasoning whatsoever, a person who lacks the karmic link may simply not give rise to faith. A lot of people in the world today, students or intellectuals for example, on the surface, in terms of character and overall quality, seem rather accomplished. But the moment you bring up the Dharma, they quickly refute it and say, I don't believe in any of that. Ask them, why don't you believe? And they answer, because I just don't. It's as simple as that. This attitude is fairly common nowadays. So among all the factors, a past life connection is an indispensable one. I feel it is essential. But without faith, no matter how extraordinary the Dharma is, many people simply cannot enter the path, whereas those of us here all have faith. Without faith, you would not have come here to study. There is no other reason to stay. Everyone here clearly has this karmic connection. Sometimes I think about how many monastics we have here and how remarkable our connections are. Otherwise, consider this: your education, your parents and family, even the neighbors nearby, your relatives and friends. To be honest, The environment you come from is not very favorable for the Dharma. The surroundings you grew up in, from childhood until now, are not like Tibet at all. In Tibet, everyone believes in Buddhism. Everyone chants the Buddha's name. If you grew up in such surroundings from childhood, faith would come more easily. But even without such favorable surroundings, your virtuous roots eventually awakened on their own. Some of you became ordained monastics. Others took lay precepts. This kind of karmic connection is wonderful. Without faith, you could not enter this path. So having faith should fill us with joy. Since we can now turn our minds toward the Dharma, this is called the advantage of faith. Once we have faith, we should make good use of this human life. Faith alone is not enough. We need to rely on that faith and constantly apply this human life to the Dharma. In the past, in Tibet, there was a very great master named Rongton Sheja Kanrig. As he was about to pass away, he gave all his disciples 2 lines of instruction. He said, "From now on, I hope that all of you, my disciples, will devote yourselves earnestly to study and contemplation during the day, and to diligent practice at night." After giving his disciples this advice, he passed away in peace. Our precious Guru Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often quoted these words. He would say that during the day we should engage in debate, discussion, attending teachings, and giving teachings, doing this earnestly with all our fellow practitioners. Everyone should study and discuss the Dharma together, for through such discussion, many negative thoughts and doubts can vanish on the spot. When you bring your wrong ideas out into the open before many wise practitioners, and everyone challenges and dissects them together, in the end, none of the doubts are left. They all dissolve completely. This is an excellent method. Then at night, when it is quieter and more peaceful, you contemplate and meditate on what you have studied and reflected on during the day. Whenever we have the chance, now and in the future, we should spend our lives in this way. That is the instruction of our lineage masters. In sum, the 5 advantages discussed above are what we need from our own side. They all depend on ourselves. Being born in a central land, having all faculties intact, obtaining a human identity, having a lifestyle that does not conflict with the Dharma, and turning toward the Dharma with faith. All of these are accomplished through ourselves. Each of you should examine whether you have these 5 conditions. Do I have them or not? I would say everyone here should have them all, and we should rejoice at that. Why? Because if even one of these 5 advantages were missing, everything could be different. You might not even be here. If you lack faith, the whole basis for entering the Dharma is gone. If you were born in a remote border region, you could go through decades of life without ever encountering the Dharma. Then there's no way for you to know about the Dharma. I sometimes think that we came into this world at the most suitable time. Why? Because after the 1970s and 1980s came to an end, we still had the chance to study the Dharma. We were still fairly young and could take some of it in. And over these past 2 or 3 decades, the overall political and social climate has been fairly stable, without any major upheavals. None of that has happened. So our Dharma study over these years has gone smoothly and steadily. Of course, as individuals, we may run into obstacles now and then, feeling low one day, falling ill the next, catching a cold, a cough, an upset stomach. These are minor matters. Looking at the big picture, never mind a long stretch of time, even 5 years, 10 years, or just 1 year, of having the chance to study the Dharma properly in a single lifetime is already extremely rare and precious. Think about it. Most people in the world today are pursuing nothing of the sort. Everyone should understand that. So these are called the 5 individual advantages. Now, let's discuss the advantage of support in more detail. In the following section, I will expand a little on each of them. The first is the advantage of support. To practice the authentic, sublime Dharma correctly, being born as a human is an absolute prerequisite. If you want to practice the Dharma properly, you first need a human body. Without one, the best of the three lower realms would be the animals. But even among animals that live among humans, no matter how beautiful or how expensive people consider them, no matter how many fine qualities they may have, if you say to one of them right now, just recite Om Mani Padme Hum Share one time, and you will attain Buddhahood at once. The sad truth is that it absolutely cannot understand you. First of all, it cannot grasp what we are saying. Say you walk up to a goat or a yak and tell it, quick, recite Om Mani Padme Hum Share for me right now, and you will attain Buddhahood on the spot. Now, some people's words carry a great deal of weight, but no matter how commanding you sound, the yak might not so much as twitch an ear. It just sits there, wholly oblivious to the meaning of everything you have said, unable to utter a single word or syllable in reply. So on the whole, the vast majority of animals plainly are not able to do this. But there are some special, exceptional cases, which I have mentioned before. In the history of Chinese Buddhism, some beings, even though their bodies had become those of animals, through the merit of hearing the sutras, were eventually reborn as humans. There are quite a number of such accounts, and I have told some of them before. For instance, at Xingguo Temple in Jinan, there was a master called Datong who regularly recited the Lotus Sutra. As he was reciting it one day, there was a white-necked earthworm in the corner beneath his wall. The earthworm had been listening for 3 years, but then a young novice monastic, while weeding with a hoe, accidentally sliced the earthworm's body in two. The novice was full of regret and buried it in the ground. Yet because it had listened to the Lotus Sutra, the earthworm was reborn as a human being. Later, after being ordained at the monastery, though he could not read, he could recite the entire Lotus Sutra from memory. When Master Datong passed away, this former earthworm also prepared to leave the world in the sitting posture. He took refuge in, I believe, Master Kongu. When he passed away, all sorts of auspicious signs appeared. So from these various historical accounts, we can see that there are indeed quite a few special, unusual cases of animals gaining a human rebirth after hearing the Dharma. Some of them may have been manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and some may have understood human speech. Such cases do exist. For example, in the Ming Dynasty, there was a scholar who kept a parrot that could chant the name of Avalokiteshvara perfectly, morning and evening. It would recite incessantly. It could even recite some of Li Bai's poems, even ones that are rarely circulated. But then one day it said something remarkable. It said, I have come from the Western Pure Land, and today I shall return there. That very night it died. This event was fairly well known in its time, and there are records of it. Reflecting on all this, the great biography of Buddha Shakyamuni tells us that many animals are manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There is the story of Avalokiteshvara as the horse king Balaha, and in the same great biography, the story of the fish Rohita. There are a great many stories of animals who came with the sole purpose to liberate sentient beings. Such cases are fairly common. I have also heard that in the Tang dynasty, there was a parrot that would not eat after noon. After midday, it would not so much as look at food, and simply would not eat. There was once a lay practitioner who had said to me, "Oh, keeping the 8 precepts is so painful. I am starving. I am going to starve to death." In reality, one afternoon of fasting cannot be all that bad, but some people are perhaps just used to eating in the afternoon. They kept complaining, I'm starving. What shall I do?" I told them, hungry ghosts go 12 years without eating a single thing, so just contemplate that carefully. They said they were so hungry they could not even contemplate. But to return to that parrot, in the afternoon it generally would not eat, and when someone told it that, According to the Amitabha Sutra, parrots and many other animals are manifestations of Buddha Amitabha. Its faith grew even stronger. From then on, it chanted the Buddha's name every single day with tremendous diligence. It was especially eager to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha. When the parrot was nearing death, those around it thought it had already passed. At that point, they struck a chime and chanted alongside it. And as they struck the chime and recited, the parrot recited aloud right along with them until it passed away and was reborn in the Pure Land. There is such an account. In the Song dynasty, too, there was a Meena bird that recited the name of Amitabha Buddha as it died and was reborn in the Pure Land. Many such stories are recorded throughout history, and I believe there are some unusual cases in Tibet as well. But Patrul Rinpoche's point here is that ordinary, everyday animals are, generally speaking, limited in their intelligence and capabilities. When it comes to anything transcendent, such as practicing or doing retreat, they simply cannot do it. For us humans, even at our worst, if we cannot keep the precepts over the long term, we can still keep the 8 precepts for a single day. That is no problem at all. If we cannot manage a great many mantras, we can at least recite 10,000 Vajrasattva mantras in one day. That too is no problem. At the very least, we humans have this kind of advantage. Animals are simply not like this. Nowadays, there are animals that people consider extremely beautiful and extremely valuable. What do they call them now? Tibetan mastiffs. Many people in mainland China call those big dogs from Tibet Tibetan mastiffs. Some of these dogs are said to be worth 40 million yuan. Can you imagine? 40 million yuan. Incredibly expensive. And there was also a case, I think, in which a Japanese man bought a dog in America. I have forgotten the exact details, but reportedly he paid $10 million for it. On the surface, 40 million yuan or $10 million are staggering sums. Back when I was a student, in 1971, a pair of giant pandas was sold to some country. The reported price was $250,000. And there are many stories about it. But no matter how much money changed hands, and no matter how valuable such animals may appear, when it comes to doing something meaningful, they cannot recite even a single Avalokiteshvara mantra. That is very pitiful. So we should consider what it would be like to be reborn as one of these animals. Sure, maybe they can swim, maybe they can perform tricks. All of that is possible. But the meaningful, virtuous deeds that plant positive roots are wholly beyond them. Even when they are about to freeze to death, all they can do is bow their heads and endure it. They simply wait there to die. There is nothing else they can do, and they cannot think of any other way. A human being, however, no matter how frail, at least knows, when about to freeze, to go and find a small cave for shelter. He can start digging into the ground, or gather some firewood, or ask to borrow someone's dung shed for shelter. When I say dung shed, everyone in our institute knows what I mean. But out in some of the big cities, people would wonder what on earth a dung shed is. Is it a tent made of cow dung? Anyway, people can go there, gather firewood, and light a fire to keep warm. Humans can do all these things. Apart from those who genuinely cannot fend for themselves, people are a bit different from animals. Whatever the situation, some people will always find a way to work something out on their own. So the other day someone said something about this. Well, never mind. I won't go into it. But an animal does not have even this basic ability, let alone any thought of practicing the Dharma. Since animals lack even these survival skills, Dharma practice is out of the question. As for the gods, exquisitely beautiful though their bodies are, they cannot serve as qualified vessels for the pratimoksha vows, so their own mind streams, too, lack the opportunity to obtain the complete and perfect Dharma. All right, Let us stop here for today.
Sonandai tamsa thobaya tonani de jana base jirgana jirano chubai jubun zonen droa droa
Bandangara Badma Asadarda Bandangara Badma Asada Bandangara Badma Asadarda